welcome to Apologetics 101. I am your host, Christian apologist, Brian. Keep going. Well, all right. Today, I am responding to one Dr. Zach Hancock. He has a reputation online being a critic concerning population genetics, but me and him has debated a couple times before, usually in a live chat in a video, and he debated me recently. He didn't really debate. He was actually debating someone else, and he rarely ever interacted with me except uh, maybe a couple times. But most of the time, he just kind of interacted with the other person he was debating. Another guy whose YouTube channel is designated as George Bond. I assume that's his real name, but anyway, it is his YouTube channel. And George was on point. I mean, he was at it. He knew his stuff. He got it. He knew exactly what the deal is with mutations and why the critical objections did not work as a result. But Zach Hancock still wanted to defend the idea that mutations can result in new genetic information. Now, here's the thing: mutations cannot generate new information. We've never observed that from mutations ever. Sometimes you can arise a new function. Sometimes you could do something different with the same information that's already there, but that's not the same as new information. Uh, Now, there's a common argument that is made among a lot of evolutionists where they would try to argue for duplications plus mutations would equal new information. This is false. This is 100% false. What it is that you can duplicate the same information. Information can be copied. That's true universally. I mean, I can copy the files on a computer. I can copy the songs on a CD. I can do all those things because information can be copied. Genetic information is no different. It can be copied. In fact, it happens in nature. That's what happens with identical twins. The information is being copied. We see that in genes and things like that. We see that in cell growth and things like that. We see these things, information being copied. It happens naturally. It can also be induced in laboratory experiments. Cloning, for example, would be an unnatural example of of information being duplicated. So we know information can be duplicated. And so what they argue is that if I duplicate this information and then I mutate the information, then maybe that this would result in new information, but that doesn't. If you duplicate the information, you wind up with the same amount of information. It's just the same information that's been duplicated, but you need unique information. You need original information. You need information that was not there previously. So what they would try to argue is that okay, well then I'll mutate this information. If this information is mutated, then maybe that would result in new information. It really wouldn't be no difference if you mutated information without copying it. Copying information and then mutating it doesn't produce new information. What happens is mutations always result in either a loss of information or a scrambling of the information. And even scrambling information, in some sense, is a loss of information because the original genetic code is affected. It's corrupted as a result. That's what genetic or mutations are, is that they're mistakes in the genetic code. And if you duplicate the information, okay, you duplicate the same information, and then all you do is and you mutate it, then you create a loss of information of the same information you just duplicated. That doesn't result in a new information. Sometimes you can result in new functions, not new features. No, new because you need new information to result in new features, but you can result in new functions as a result. You know, like maybe the information that's present minus other information can result in something that can be repurposed to do something different. I mean, that's always possible, but that's not new information. That's working off the same information, and you're just kind of losing the information. In order to create new features, in order to be able to create new autonomies and biology and biological uh, uh, and physiological forms and things like that, new body plans in the genome, in the history of life on this planet. In order to be able to do all those things, you have to have new information. You have to have unique information. You have information that was not there previously. DNA is a language system. It is it's like a computer code inside our genetics. It's instructions for the cells. It tells the cell what to do, how to do it, and it also tells how to produce things like RNA and proteins and things like that. And in addition to that, it also tells us how we are genetically, as far as physiological, uh, and that includes all life on this planet. Um, Without it, that's why that they call DNA the building blocks of life. As a result, and all life has DNA in it. And so, in order to argue that uh, that all life is related and descended from a common ancestor, you would need new information to arise at various points in order to arise at all the body plans and all the life forms that exist on planet Earth. You would have to have that at some given point because there's obviously different information that exists in plants than exist in other types of organic life. And there's different information that exists in other different organic life as well. You know, the information in a horse is going to be different from the information inside a frog, different inside of an ant, different inside of a primate, monkey, human, or whatever the case may be. Humans have different information in them than that of a monkey. Now, there's similarities always because we have a common designer and we expect similarities. So there's similarities, but that's not similarities doesn't mean relationship. So you're going to have to sit there and show um, how new information had arisen. Now, when we observe mutations, we do not observe information creating new new or mutations creating new information ever. We never observed that. What Zach Hancock had mentioned in the chat was that he mentioned a study. He didn't really cite any specific study. He just basically said that he can present us studies that show that new information had arisen inside mutations. Now, in reality, this is not true, but we'll get into that in here in a second. And so I counter that by saying, well, I could show you creationist studies that show that new information does not arise. New information cannot arise by mutations. I can counter that with me that. Now sometime like maybe a short time after that, I had quoted, and I will actually be presenting that quote today as well from the book Not by Chance by a evolutionist by the name Dr. Lee Spetner. He's actually one of the world's leading experts on point mutations. Um, Point mutations is what would be required by neo-Darwinian view, which is most evolutionists today are neo-Darwinists. And that's the idea that they had like genetics and stuff like that into it, but mostly what they're basically saying is that they think mutations is the driving force of the evolutionary view. And so I quoted from that, and he said, "Well, you already rejected every study that's ever been made." Did I do that? No, that's actually a straw man argument. That's not what I did. For one thing, I mentioned the creationist studies. Why in the world would I mention creation studies and if I ignored every study that's out there? Second of all, and he said, accused me of that right after I quoted from Lee Spetner, who created a study on that. He's one of the world's leading experts on point mutations. Obviously, I didn't reject every study, and I didn't really even reject the evolutionary ones either. Rejection of a study would be like if a study exists that they came up with a new type of enzyme that has a new function, that sort of thing. And they new enzyme that came about as a result of mutation. And then I said, no, nope, nope, enzyme that didn't exist. Didn't It's not even true. That would be a rejection of the study. But to acknowledge the study and then say, no, that's not new information, that's not a rejection of the study. That's a rejection of Hancock's interpretation of that study, not of the study itself. In fact, despite the evolutionary motivations and presuppositions, some of these studies are even interesting. They're not bad studies necessarily. Um, Now, I would probably say that most of these studies do not refer to these as new information. I'm not going to say all, okay? I'm not going to use a universal like that because as soon as I do that, Hancock is going to figure out some way to throw in one that labels it as new information. I had someone present me with one time that they label it as a new information. I'll get into that in a second. And someone's going to be able to do that. I mean, it's always possible because these things do have their presuppositions in it, but that has to do with the study. Okay, the person who claims that new information that this is new information must demonstrate that stuff, but especially when it goes against everything we've ever observed in mutations. They can't just simply label that and accept that. If they label it as that and then just kind of move on, then all they've really done is presuppose that that's the case. That's a presupposition. It's not the case. Now, the vast majority of the time, though, they're not actually calling it new information. What they do is they say, "Hey, that happened in this study. Oh, we got came up with a new form of enzyme." And then next thing you know, someone like Hancock comes along and says, "See there, that's new information." And I reject his interpretation of that because that's not new information. Because the cell already had the ability to make enzymes. It already had the knowledge to make it. It's just a different type of enzyme. It developed a new function, not a new feature, not a new, it's a version of enzymes. Because the cell knew how to make enzymes, but that's not new information because it has to be information that was not there previously. Was there information there to make enzymes? Yeah. So it's not new information. If the information exists to make enzymes, proteins, none of that would be new information. It has to be information that did not exist previously. Like one that I like to use commonly, a common view among the vast majority of evolutionists today is that birds evolved from a type of dinosaur called a theropod dinosaur. All right, they claim that they evolved into that. Theropod dinosaurs were the dinosaurs with the hollow bones and like Velociraptor, T Rex, etc. And so they say that these things evolved into birds. Well, feathers and scales have two different kinds of information in it. Now, here's the kick. Here's a kicker here. Um, Birds actually have scales. They have scales on their legs. It's different kind of scales, but they have scales on their legs. So birds already have the information to produce scales, but they don't. But reptiles do not have the information to produce feathers. Okay, and so evolutionists are claiming that a type of reptile, because that's what dinosaurs were. They're of that broader classification of reptiles, and they're a specific type of dinosaur, theropod dinosaurs, and they claim that these evolved into birds. Well, if they evolved into birds, then then at some given point, information had to be added to the genome because reptiles of any classification, no matter where you go on the spectrum there, has feathers. None of them do. And so that means that information had to have been added. There's always a possibility of God creating a dinosaur with feathers, but we never observed that. All right, so we don't know whether that's the case or not, and but evolutionists claim it is the case. So the burden of proof is on them, and so they have to provide the information. or the mechanism to generate the information, they could be able to take away scales and that exist in reptiles and add feathers, because feathers is a different type of information. The information that goes on to make a feather is not the same kind of information that goes on to make scales. Now, birds already have a type of scales on their legs. It's different from reptile scales, but they do have scales on their legs. But they don't have, or that the dinosaurs would not have had feathers. So the question is, at some given point, that they would have had to evolve feathers, and that requires a mechanism by which to add new information. If the claim by the evolutionists, and it is, that mutations is the mechanism by which new information is being added, well, does mutations do that? Well, no, they don't. Mutations do not add new genetic information. What mutations do is they can subtract from the information, they can take away the information, or they can reroute the information that's already there. But what they do not do is add information that wasn't there previously. We never see that. Now, there's times where you might have a duplication where information is duplicated. Information can be copied. Genetic information is no different than any other kind of information. It can be copied. It can be copied naturally or unnaturally. It doesn't matter. It's squarely within the bounds of the laws of physics and genetics and so forth. So we know that it can happen. We've observed it can happen. We can observe it happens today. We can see that it happens naturally today. So we know information can be copied. So copying the information, all you're going to wind up with is the same information. And then they try to add mutations in there, like that's going to automatically increase it. Like yes, yeah, it's not just copying it. You also mutate it, but if you mutate it, you're causing a loss of information. If if I come up with a statement, think of it this way: if I come up with a statement, and my statement is um, that evolution is false, okay? But let's say you want to mutate that uh, to me or going to or Brian went to the supermarket, which is a completely different statement from evolution is false, right? It's a completely different statement, and so you have to be able to make it where the mutation spells out that much information, or that information exactly to that spells out that instructions, or that statement. Well, if you say, okay, I'll duplicate it. Well, if you duplicate it, you wind up with two different statements that says evolution is false. Okay, you're just winding up duplicating the same information. You're not really adding new information. They know this, so they say, okay, then maybe we can mutate it. Well, mutations cause a loss of information, so what happens is that second statement that says evolution is false, you leave some letters in it. Okay, um, in case of genetics, it would be bases, but you lose letters in it, right? And so what that would be is, you might have an E, and might retain the L, or whatever the case may be. That could develop a new function, possibly. Maybe you can create some kind of purpose with the remaining letters, but it's still using the same information that's already there, or at least that's left from the copy DNA. But what you have not done is produce new information. In order to produce new information, you've got to produce something that was not there but previously. Obviously, the statement that Brian went to the supermarket is very different from the statement evolution is false. And so you're not producing anything new by copying it and then subtracting from it. And on top of that, evolution requires a forward progression. If you keep on losing information and keep going backwards, how is that ever going to ultimately form every life form on this planet? It wouldn't, because you're constantly losing information, not gaining it. And that's critically important. And so, uh, but yeah, back to what I said, Zach did straw man me there. That I did not reject every study. I rejected his interpretation of those studies. Um, and obviously, if a study says to just label it as uh, as a new information, it's up to that person who's saying that to demonstrate. If they don't, it's nothing more than a presupposition on their part. But most of them probably didn't even call it new information. It's just Zach's interpretation that it's new information. And so I reject Zach's interpretation of those papers. It's not new information. Now that doesn't mean that I don't favor the I don't favor the uh, conclusion of the study. You know, they might have came up with a new form of enzyme or a new type of protein or whatever the case may be, and I'm okay with that. But that would not be new information. The genome already had the ability to make enzymes. It already had the ability to make proteins. So you didn't create anything new. You just simply worked off the information that was already present. Now, I'm going to quote from the world's leading expert on point mutations. He is I don't know of any other guy that's done more study than this guy has on point mutations. All right, we're here, and I got this in my slides here. All right, this is from Lee Spetner, who, by the way, is not a Christian. He is a Jew. He is a was the world's leading expert on point mutations, and he is an evolutionist. He just has issues with neo Darwinism, but he is an evolutionist. And he wrote a book called Not by Chance. And on page 138, he says all point mutations that have been studied on the molecular level turn out to reduce the genetic information and not to increase it. He also states on page 160 of his book, not even one mutation has been observed that adds a little information to the genome. That surely shows that there are not the millions upon millions of potential mutations the theory demands. There may well not be any. The failure to observe even one mutation that adds information is more than just a failure to find support for the theory, it is evidence against the theory. We have here a serious challenge to neo Darwinian theory. That's from Lee Spetner, the world's foremost expert on the subject matter of point mutations. I actually have a couple more quotes from another guy, and he wrote a book called "In the Beginning Was Information." We're gonna get. He's probably one of the foremost experts on information in the world. He's written a number of books on the subject matter. He's an engineer, and I have a couple quotes from him as well. He is a YC, unlike the previous person that I quoted. But I'm gonna show you quotes from both of these sources, and they're really good sources as well. All right. Um, okay, there is no natural law. This is from Werner Getz. In the beginning was information. A scientist explains the incredible design in nature. And this particular quote is on pages 79 through 80. He says, there is no known natural law through which matter can give rise to information. Neither is any physical process or material phenomenon known that can do this. He also says on page 106 of his book, the same book, there is no known law of nature, no known process, and no known sequence of events which can cause information to originate by itself in matter. So, no, Zach, this is completely inaccurate. Copying information and then mutating it does not create new information. And it's not me rejecting these studies. As far as I know, I haven't really I can't say I looked at every study that's ever been done, but the ones I have looked at, I don't have any issue with their conclusion in terms of of new enzymes or new proteins or new functions being figured out or resistance to bacteria or whatever the case may be. I'm okay with those things. It's not the studies that I have issues with. It's what someone interprets them as and says, "Oh, well, that must be new information." And it's like, no, that's not new information. The cell already had the information to produce those things. So it's not new information. It has to be unique to the genome. Unique. Information that was not there previously. If the information was already there previously, it's not new. It's not new. You're just taking the same information, causing some form of change, because even losing information is still a change. But then the change is resulting in new functions, but it doesn't result in new features. It's the same information. In order to get new features, you have to have new information, not the same information, not information that's a loss of information. You got to have unique information, and that unique information has to be added to the genome. And that's not what you got, Zach. So what you said in that live chat was completely inaccurate, and you did straw man me there, because I didn't say I rejected every study. I never even claimed to have rejected every study. So the accusation is completely false, and I think maybe the straw man was intentional. That was not the case. You should have known that that was not the case, since I brought up creation studies, and I brought up Lee Spector's book all before you even accused me of that. So it's clear that I did not reject every study. I reject your interpretation of those studies, but I don't reject every study. No, that is inaccurate. It is better to say that does any of these things that we observe about mutations add new genetic information? And the answer is no, they don't. And so uh, that's all I want to say on that subject matter. But mutations do not add new genetic information. Copying, duplicating the information, I don't really see any reason, purpose of that, because you could set there mutate normal information. Why? What's the point in duplicating it when you know duplicating it won't give you new information either? But some reason they say, oh well, you duplicate the information, and then we point out the duplicate information won't get you new information. They say, yeah, but it's plus mutations. Mutations does that too. But mutations don't create new information either. If you got two things that don't produce new information, how are you gonna get new information from that?
And no cruising around with Dion, all right? Two permits do not equal a license.
One just takes the same information and copy it, and the other causes a loss of information. So how is that new information? And essentially that's logical, right? You got two different things that do not add new information. It's not going to make new information. It's just not. I mean, so you still lack a mechanism to produce new information. But anyway, that's all I want to say. I thought that I wanted to give a more robust response. When you're responding to someone in a live chat, it's very difficult because you're sitting there, you're limited on how many words you could say. You're limited by the time span of the video that's going on, and so it's very difficult to really get everything out. And Zach had strawman me there, and I realized, wait a minute. That's not even the position I hold. That's not even what I said. So it's like, what in the world? So I figured I needed to respond to that. All right. Thank you for listening. And this is Apologetics 101 saying stay in the know.